In the world of luxury cars, few names carry as much power as Bugatti. For over 100 years, the brand has built a reputation based on exclusivity, precision engineering, and strict control over its vehicles. Owning a Bugatti is not just about buying a car, it is about entering a closed system where everything is managed by the company, from servicing to repairs. But recently, something unusual happened that challenged this system. A single car, a Bugatti Chiron Pur Sport, became the center of a global discussion. This was not because it broke records or introduced new technology, but because it crashed, and what happened after that crash changed everything. Instead of quietly disappearing like most damaged hypercars, this car became a public project. The rebuild process was shared online for millions to watch, turning what should have been a private issue into a global story. This situation has raised serious questions about how much control a car manufacturer should have after selling a vehicle. It has also shown how modern platforms like YouTube can break the traditional secrecy of luxury industries. What started as a simple accident has now become something much bigger, a challenge to how companies like Bugatti operate, protect their image, and maintain control over their products. One of the biggest reasons this situation became so important is because of the decisions made by the car's owner after the crash. Normally, when a hypercar like a Bugatti is heavily damaged, the owner either accepts the insurance payout or sends the car back to the factory for repair. This keeps everything controlled and hidden from the public. However, in this case, the owner chose a completely different path. After the insurance company declared the car a total loss, he bought it back at auction instead of walking away. Then, instead of sending it back to Bugatti, he handed it over to Mat Armstrong, a YouTuber known for rebuilding crashed cars. This decision alone broke the usual pattern, but what made it even more impactful was that the entire process was documented online. Every step of the rebuild was shared publicly, allowing viewers to see how such a complex machine works. This level of transparency is rare in the hypercar world, where companies prefer to keep technical details private. As the rebuild progressed, it started to challenge the idea that only the manufacturer can repair these cars. Each successful step made people question whether Bugatti's strict control over repairs is truly necessary or simply a way to protect its business model. This shift in thinking is what turned a single rebuild into a much larger debate about ownership and independence. Another key moment in this story was when the damaged car was sent to auction instead of being taken back by Bugatti. At that point, the company had an opportunity to quietly remove the problem. In the hypercar industry, it is not unusual for manufacturers to buy back damaged vehicles to protect their brand image. This helps prevent uncontrolled repairs or public exposure of their engineering. In this case, the car could have been purchased for around $2 million, which is a small amount compared to its original value of $6 million. If Bugatti had taken this step, the situation would likely have ended there. The car could have been dismantled or repaired privately, and no one outside the company would have known about it. However, Bugatti chose not to do this. While this decision may have saved money in the short term, it allowed the car to fall into the hands of someone willing to rebuild it publicly. As a result, the company lost control of the situation. What could have been a quiet and contained issue quickly turned into a global story followed by millions of viewers. This decision is now seen by many as a major mistake, as it opened the door to everything that followed. It shows how even small decisions can have huge consequences, especially in industries where reputation is so important. The situation became even more complicated when Bugatti decided to respond publicly. Instead of staying silent, the company, led by CEO Mat Armstrong, released a video explaining why the rebuild should not happen. The goal was to highlight safety concerns and explain the complexity of the car. On the surface, this seemed like a reasonable approach. However, by speaking publicly, Bugatti invited people to analyze and question its claims. Every statement made by the company became open to discussion and debate. For example, when Bugatti suggested that the car should not be rebuilt, critics pointed out that it had been given a salvage title, which legally means it can be repaired. When the company argued that certain parts were unique and difficult to replace, the rebuild process showed that some components were shared with other vehicles. These details did not completely weaken Bugatti's position, but they did create doubt. Instead of ending the discussion, The company's response made the situation more visible and more controversial. This highlights a difficult balance for companies. Staying silent can make them seem unresponsive, but speaking out can sometimes make things worse. In this case, Bugatti's attempt to control the narrative may have actually helped spread it further as the rebuild continues. The impact of this situation keeps growing. What started as a single damaged car has now become a symbol of a much larger issue. It has raised questions about ownership rights, repair freedom, and the role of manufacturers after a sale is complete. Traditionally, buying a hypercar meant accepting certain rules, including relying on the manufacturer for maintenance and repairs. This system helped companies maintain quality and protect their brand image. However, the public rebuild of this Bugatti challenges that idea. It shows that, with enough skill and determination, independent builders can work on even the most complex vehicles. This does not mean that manufacturer support is unnecessary, but it does suggest that the system may not be as strict as once believed. For Bugatti, the situation represents a loss of control over both the car and the story surrounding it. For viewers, it represents something exciting, a rare look inside a world that is usually hidden. As more people follow the rebuild, the discussion continues to grow, and the long-term effects are still unknown. What is clear, however, is that this event will likely influence how both manufacturers and owners think about control and independence in the future. In the end, Bugatti's situation can be seen as a powerful example of how quickly things can change in the modern world. A single decision, to sell a car, not buy it back, and respond publicly, led to a chain of events that the company could not fully control. The story shows how technology and social media have changed the balance of power between companies and individuals. Information that was once kept private can now be shared with millions of people in real time. This makes it harder for companies to manage their image and control the narrative. For Bugatti, this may become one of the most important lessons in its history. The cost of this situation may not be measured in money alone, but in how people view the brand and its practices. For the automotive world, it marks a turning point where transparency and independence are becoming more important. And for viewers, it is a fascinating story that continues to unfold. What began as a simple crash has turned into a global conversation, proving that even the most powerful brands are not immune to change in an increasingly connected world. One of the most important parts of this story is not just the car or the company, but the platform where everything is happening, YouTube. In the past, industries like luxury cars relied heavily on secrecy. Companies controlled information, limited access, and made sure that only a small group of people truly understood how their products worked. This created a sense of mystery and exclusivity, which made brands like Bugatti even more desirable. However, platforms like YouTube have completely changed this system. When Mat Armstrong began documenting the rebuild of the damaged Bugatti Chiron Per Sport, he was not just fixing a car, he was sharing knowledge that was once hidden. Millions of viewers could now see how parts are removed, how systems are repaired, and how problems are solved step by step. This kind of transparency weakens the idea that only the manufacturer has the ability to understand or fix these vehicles. It turns something that seemed impossible into something that is simply difficult. Over time, this can change how people think about ownership. Instead of feeling dependent on the manufacturer, owners may start to feel more independent. This shift is powerful because it challenges the traditional balance of control. It shows that information is no longer limited to companies, and once it becomes public, it cannot be taken back. For a company like Bugatti, reputation is everything. These cars are not just machines, they are symbols of status, wealth, and perfection. Every detail, from design to customer experience, is carefully managed to maintain this image. That is why this situation is so serious. It is not just about whether a car can be rebuilt, but about how people see the brand. When viewers watch the rebuild process and see problems being solved outside the factory, it changes their perception. They may begin to question why repairs are so restricted or why costs are so high. Even if Bugatti's reasons are valid, the public discussion creates doubt. And in luxury markets, perception can be just as important as reality. A small shift in how people view a brand can have long-term effects. This is why many companies try to avoid situations like this entirely. They understand that once a narrative starts to spread, it becomes very difficult to control. In this case, the story has moved beyond Bugatti's control and is now shaped by millions of viewers, each forming their own opinion. This makes it much harder for the company to protect its image, especially when new updates in the rebuild continue to attract attention. The center of this entire story is a simple but important question. Who really owns a car after it is sold? Traditionally, buying a vehicle meant full ownership. You could repair it, modify it, or do whatever you wanted with it. However, in the world of hypercars, things are different. Companies like Bugatti often maintain a level of control even after the sale. This includes limiting access to parts, requiring factory servicing, and setting strict rules for repairs. These policies are usually justified by safety concerns and the complexity of the vehicles. But the public rebuild of the Bugatti Chiron Per Sport challenges this idea. It suggests that independent experts can also handle these cars, raising questions about whether such strict control is necessary. This has started a wider debate about right to repair, a topic that is already important in other industries like electronics. Supporters of repair freedom argue that owners should have full control over their property, while companies argue that restrictions are needed to ensure safety and quality. This situation brings that debate into the hypercar world, where the stakes are much higher due to the cost and complexity of the vehicles. As more people follow this story, the discussion is likely to grow, potentially influencing future policies and customer expectations. Looking ahead, this situation could have lasting effects on the entire hypercar industry. Companies may start to rethink how they handle damaged vehicles, possibly becoming more proactive in buying them back or controlling where they end up. They might also change how they communicate with the public, choosing more carefully when and how to respond to situations like this. At the same time, independent builders and content creators may feel encouraged by this example. Seeing a project like this succeed can inspire others to attempt similar work, further increasing transparency in the industry. For customers, this could mean more options and greater freedom, but it could also lead to new rules and restrictions as companies try to protect their interests. The balance between control and independence is likely to become a key issue in the coming years. What makes this story so important is that it is happening in real time. The outcome is not yet known, and each new development adds another layer to the discussion. Whether it leads to major changes or simply becomes a unique case, it has already shown that even the most exclusive industries are not immune to change. In a world where information spreads quickly and widely, control is no longer guaranteed, and companies must adapt to a new reality where transparency is unavoidable. What makes this situation stand out is how different it is from similar events in the past. Crashes involving expensive cars are not new, and neither are complex repairs. However, in earlier times, these stories rarely reached the public. Everything happened behind closed doors, managed quietly by companies like Bugatti or private specialists. Customers valued privacy, and manufacturers worked hard to protect their image by keeping such incidents out of the spotlight. Today, that approach is much harder to maintain. Social media and video platforms have changed how information spreads. A single project, like the rebuild of the Bugatti Chiron Per Sport, can now reach millions of people around the world. This creates a level of attention that did not exist before. It also changes how people interact with these stories. Instead of just reading about a repair, viewers can watch every step, form opinions, and even debate the decisions being made. This active involvement makes the story feel more real and more important. It also means that companies cannot rely on old methods of controlling information. Once something becomes public, it quickly grows beyond its original scope. In this case, what started as a repair project has become a global discussion about control, transparency, and the future of the automotive industry. That is what makes this situation feel so unique. It represents a shift not just in one company, but in how entire industries operate in a connected world. Another important part of this story is the role of individuals. In the past, large companies had most of the power, especially in specialized industries like hypercars. They controlled the technology, the knowledge, and the customer experience. But now, individuals with the right skills and platforms can challenge that power. People like Mat Armstrong are not just mechanics, they are content creators, educators, and influencers. By sharing their work online, They can reach a global audience and change how people think. In this case, the rebuild project has shown that one person, or a small team, can take on a challenge that many believed only a manufacturer could handle. This does not mean that companies are no longer important, but it does show that their control is not absolute. The internet has created a space where knowledge can be shared freely, and where ideas can spread quickly. This gives individuals more influence than ever before. It also creates new opportunities for learning and collaboration. At the same time, it puts pressure on companies to be more open and adaptable. They can no longer assume that their authority will go unquestioned. Instead, they must be prepared to explain their decisions and respond to public feedback. This shift in power is one of the most significant aspects of this story, and it is likely to shape the future of many industries, not just automotive. There are several important lessons that companies can learn from this situation. First, small decisions can have large consequences. Choosing not to buy back a damaged car may have seemed like a simple financial decision at the time, but it led to a much bigger issue later. Second,